you hear me? Thank you. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey through computational storage use cases and what we've done over the last half decade or so to hopefully inspire people to go further. First of all, computational storage, why? So for us, we have these very, very large data sets that are produced from simulations. So think of a job running across 10,000 nodes with a petabyte of DRAM. It writes out its state every 15 minutes, and after a few days, you have 100 petabytes, and after a few months, you have a lot more. And you're essentially trying to figure out what's in those data sets and find nice features to follow, and not have to keep the 100 petabytes, but only keep a much smaller amount of data that represents that data. And so we're sort of the poster child for wanting to try to push computation, reduction, and those sorts of things close to storage as we can, because moving the data is expensive when it's petabytes in size. So we sort of think of computation in two ways, computational storage in two ways. One is what we call data agnostic offloads, which are offloads that have nothing to do with understanding what's in the data. So think compression, erasure, encoding, and things like that. And then data-aware offloads, which are offloads that understand what the data is. So think reductions and things that understand the what's in the data itself. And within the data-aware offloads, we have multiple types. Row type, which actually work pretty well for our particle codes or point codes in science. And for our grid method codes, which are what most of science uses in simulation world, columnar is how they think of themselves. So columnar offloads and columnar analytics is basically what you would use there. So we have a little of everything. Our first foray into this was a thing we called ABOF, Accelerated Box of Flash. And essentially we took ZFS, which is a popular file system in Linux kernels today. We have a developer on the payroll, and we essentially built it in such a way that you can offload compression, erasure, and encoding from ZFS. Why would you do that? Well, if you're doing a lot of deep compression, say gzip, you're going over a compression Huffman table in memory over and over and over again. So you're using a lot of memory bandwidth, a lot more memory bandwidth than you are to just push the data through the server. You can't get anywhere near the whole NIC's worth of bandwidth out of it if you turn all the compression, erasure, and all that kind of stuff on. So if you offload this stuff and pipeline it, it turns out that you can win big on performance and actually economically. The goal of this was to show that you could do this, show you could do it in such a way that if you turned all those accelerators off, the bits on the storage is exactly the same, so you could read it, whether you had the extra horsepower running or not. This was a really nice collaboration between, you can see the companies down there, and we wouldn't have gotten anywhere without those companies. So anyway, this was pretty successful, and it's being upstreamed into ZFS, so anybody that uses ZFS could use it. Moving on to data-aware analytics. So again, we have these two types. One type is row-based. One of the applications, again, that we use this for are particle codes. So think 1 trillion particles and 1 million cells, and the particles are moving around in the cells. And we are running this thing, and every few, an hour or so, or even a few minutes, we have another 1 trillion cells, trillion particles to write out their state, where they're at. And then we do that again, and then particles move around, and we write these huge data sets out. And at the end of this long run that creates 100 petabytes, the scientist says, of those 1 trillion particles, 1,000 of the particles are really interesting. Tell me where they've been and what was going on around them when they were there, right? So they want a trace of where the particle was in the 3D space. They want to know what was going on around it and so forth. Those particles think of themselves as records. Particle ID, cell ID, which is where it's at, momentum, all the things, right? And so it looked very much like a key value store where the key was particle ID. It sharded perfectly because particle IDs shard perfectly because we make them up. Throw 1,000 or throw 10,000 RocksDBs at it, shard it up, and go real fast, and that's what we did. And it was some ungodly numbers of billions of inserts a second and things like that. But we asked the question, can you push this all the way down to the device or as close to the device as possible to save as much energy and data movement as we can? We worked with SK Hynix on this and produced a working demonstration of this. It was shown at FMS last year and then this year, and it's very interesting technology. It's a full-blown ordered key value store, not just a hash. So anyway, that was very successful. And then we also just recently started working on columnar stuff. We did a demonstration with Seagate not too long ago, and I'll take you through essentially why columnar is interesting to us. I think I'll skip that. Why is columnar interesting to us? Well, you take these huge, grids that are in memory, a trillion cells in memory, and each cell, the faceplate of the cell, perhaps has 100 floating point values, right? Pressure and temperature and materials properties and things like that. And really, they're not cubes. They're really tetrahedrals that are, volumetric tetrahedrals and things like that. You can see that there's time steps in this, so if that's interesting. You can also see that the cells are different sizes, and it turns out that those cells change their size every few milliseconds. Why? Because that in this particular case, that eddy is moving around, and you want to drill in to the mesh right where the edge of the eddy, where the interesting stuff is going on, and you want to unresolve where the eddy is not, so that you can run a way bigger problem on a way too small machine. You think, well, shoot, you got a petabyte of DRAM, can't you run a big problem? The answer is no. Scientists will always beat you. So, you're always 2 or 3 orders of magnitude too small. So anyway, they use these really bizarre, ways of thinking about data and how they lay it out to get the most out of memory, which defeats everything like compression and all the things you want to throw at it because they've already compressed it out themselves. Anyway, the question that you ask yourself is, okay, you got 100 petabytes of time steps, and you want to find the edge of the eddy and follow it. And that's all you want to keep after it's all said and done. You'd like to throw that 100 petabytes away and just keep the 100 terabytes that has where the edge of that eddy was. So that's the target of this idea. And the idea is, since the data thinks of itself as columnar, we'll try to use columnar. I think I'll skip that and move right to here. So our use case is write the data out in Parquet objects because, after all, it's columnar. And there's like 100 columns and a trillion rows, and so we'll break it up into a whole bunch of Parquet objects or files. There'll be indexes associated with all the row groups. We'll write that stuff out using objects. Why objects? Because we need to pass, what's an analytic friendly chunk all the way down to the storage device, so the storage device understands this is a chunk that's analytics friendly. There's a whole row group in here. We'll call that an object. So we sort of are coining the term object computational storage. And so we'll write these objects out from our application. Our application is going to run. It's going to run on 10,000 nodes. It's going to drop these, 10 or 50 or 100 million Parquet files out every hour or something, and they'll have all the data in it. And we'll write it all out to object computational storage devices, which will understand objects, and they will also be able to understand how to do query. And then when the query part comes around, we will try to use all of the wonderful Apache ecosystem that's available to us, Presto and Spark and Substrate and Arrow and all the things that Pankaj mentioned before, to try to not have to write any code here, just steal from the community. And so the query comes in from above, it goes through these layers, and then eventually ends up where these OCSDs or OCSAs perform the actual reductions before they send the data up, so that we leave the data as far close to the devices as we can, and we only get back what we're looking for. And we're working on an open source variant of this with a whole bunch of companies, and we're going to open source all of this, so there'll be a demonstration of how to do all this. And you can see the companies at the bottom and the pieces that they provided. The first demo of this will be at Supercomputing, which is 6 weeks from now or something like that, in the SK Hynix booth. And then there'll be other demos in International Supercomputing and other things. The hope here is that we can teach the science community, the simulation science community, how to use these tools, these analytics tools, in a way that's efficient and push the push the storage to do more for us, and that way we have to buy smaller computers to do the analytics part. Again, partnering was the key to this. There's been some amazing partners that we've worked with, in this journey. I'm going to skip that and go to being done. That picture isn't of me because I never had that much hair, but I was actually at the lab at this time. That's a CDC Cyber 6600 and a Cray 1S in one of our like 19 machine rooms. Anyway, hopefully that was good. Any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
Gary, it was not clear to me what was the role of air metal in all this.
So that's a good question. So what did people provide? So Air Metal has this object server that creates that erasures chunks and puts them on to separate devices or separate file systems or separate whatever, and it leaves the chunks in analytic-friendly chunk sizes, so they can guarantee that there'll be a full parquet row group in that chunk.
Okay.
So they sort of have magic erasure technology to make this happen. They also do analytics and stuff too, and so we had them build a prototype of an SPDK-based target and initiator. The Versity code is, MinIO actually used to provide a really nice object server gateway, but they deprecated it. So we actually paid Versity to build one of these things. It's really nice, Go-based, high-performance object server that you can download, BSD, give away for free, and join the fun and help support it. And it's built to plug stuff into the bottom of it. So the whole point is it provides the object interface, but then it's like a fuse for object essentially. It's written in Go. It's very modern techniques. Has OAM in it, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, they provided that, and then NeuroBlade actually is providing. They have a really, really high performance, essentially object computational storage device. So it's kind of the Rolls-Royce side of the equation, and then we have one that's basically just software that you can download and run it on a Linux server. So everything from freeware, low function to very, very high function. So anyway, all those pieces are going to be available unless they're in red outline. Those are proprietary pieces, but everything else will be open.
Okay, thank you for a good presentation, Gary.